You are unmuted.
Okay. All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is 1:13. Today is May 13th. This is the Benzie County Board of Commissioners study session. Roll call, please.
Markey,
Here.
Nye,
Here.
Roloffs. Oh, not here, excuse. Sauer,
Here.
Brigg,
Here.
you're not.
Here.
Very good. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have an agenda before this. Is there anything we need to add before we approve it? Or remove?
Jeanette moves to approve as presented. Markey will support.
Motion and support. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have minutes to consider from April 1st.
Trigg moves to approve the minutes from April 1st.
Will support.
Motion and support. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries as well. This will open our first public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Seeing none, I will close public comment, and that will bring us to our HR update. You were just in time. Look at that.
Shelley Clark, Human Resources with the HR update. We currently have several job openings, including a single road deputy. 2 paramedic openings. We have an interview scheduled tentatively for Friday and one also confirmed for Friday for the 2 openings. 3 openings for emergency communication specialists. We have a new employee and we have 1 currently in the hiring process. 1 ongoing workers' comp claim, 2 employees on medical leave, 2 on short-term disability.
Not touchscreen.
It is not. What else did I say in this report? Ongoing projects. As I said, we're interviewing for multiple positions. I'm planning on visiting the EMS locations this week to provide a little bit of more insight into HR, what we're doing, take some forms with me. I'm still acclimating to the payroll system. I'm planning on attending the Parks and Rec Commission meeting and working on the HR budget.
She's busy.
That's it. Katie keeps me busy.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks. You good with that?
Okay.
So our topics for continued discussion. Our first one is a discussion regarding support for economic development in Benzie County. And I am going to pass this over to Commissioner Janot.
I'm going to admit Steve Arwood into the meeting first.
Okay.
Excuse me. Caught me off guard. Your report was way too fast.
She's doing payroll, man. It's very important.
So I believe Steve's on board with us,
Yep, Steve,
but
you're
in order to
on.
kick this off,
Perfect.
Oh, there he is.
Steve and I have been in conversations. And Christy, I'm going to invite you to add anything that you'd like to, but brief history. The EDC was formed originally in the 80s. It was formed by the county treasurer at the time because they had access to a rural development grant in the amount of approximately $800,000. The purpose of the grant was to put together a revolving loan fund. And that was the sole purpose of the EDC. As time went on, the EDC was making loans, but not nearly as many as they should. And they made some poor decisions, quite frankly. There was one time where we charged off a $250,000 advance. And so we decided that it would be better suited to contract that out, and eventually got contracted out to Venture North. A little bit before that, we also saw the value in combining the Brownfield Authority with the EDC, because the Brownfield Authority had very little to do. And that was in 2012 that was formed. And I want to say 2017 or 18 is when we combined the 2 groups. what we learned is there wasn't much left for the EDC to do except kind of rubber stamp, and I hate to
Right.
hear myself say that. Loan requests that were coming through that were clearly vetted better than what we were doing as a county, Venture North. And then this group here asked the EDC to run with the broadband initiative, and I think they did a really effective job with that. And what we learned from that experience, that there's value in having a paid professional that thinks about these things all the time to move them along. And I think, again, the results we got from broadband initiative would speak for itself. About a year ago, we started asking the question more seriously of what does the county's EDC look like and how could we be more effective? At the same time, the Benzie County Chamber of Commerce was asking themselves a similar question about what do they look like? The Tourism Bureau activity had gone away from them. They'd had some change of leadership there, and they were looking internally at what does their next business model look like. We began having conversations with them. As this group knows, what that led to was a request for $25,000 to hire a paid professional, Steve Arwood, who was in charge at one time of the MEDC as the executive director and currently helps other rural communities with this subject, to say, what should this look like? Let's talk about the potential of a public-private partnership. Those conversations now have been going on since we brought Steve on board, since November or December. And there's a much smaller group that's working with that, 3 from the EDC, 3 from the chamber, that we've been meeting about every other week to try to formulate a plan. So hopefully that brings you up to date. I know most of that you guys knew, but hopefully that brings you up to date as to where we're at. I've asked Steve today to spend some time with us, up to 20 minutes or so, talking about what does an effective EDC look like? How does it benefit the county, both economically and in terms of moving your county forward progressively with such things as a build out of infrastructure, et cetera. So Steve, if you're ready, I'd like to turn the conversation over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Art. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see me? I can see you, but I don't know if you guys can see me.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay. Okay. Because I kind of talk with my hands sometimes, so that's helpful. Well, as Art said, I've been helping to facilitate a smaller group that's trying to come up with the value proposition, and I think for economic development in Benzie County and how it should look going forward. And we're currently working on a model for a private public partnership, which would include joining the forces of, as Art said, the chamber and potentially the county together along with several others. But what Art asked me to do today is try to give you a fairly macro overview of the value proposition, so to speak, of good and sound economic development in a community, whether it's a county, city, a public-private partnership, whether it's a chamber only. I mean, I think these lessons go to both sides. But I want to start with, I put some stuff in your packet, and it's not, you know, it's not very expensive, but I wanted to start with just one example, and it's really close to home, of good economic development, and that is your recent participation in the cleanup of the gas station in Honor. There's a summary page, the closeout on the grant that you were all successful in getting. And I just want to point down to the bottom of the page where, you know, you started with one taxable value, and by purposes of cleaning that up, you created another taxable value. And that taxable value is really important. Now, while I know
Shut your
that,
video off because you're breaking up.
pardon me?
I'm going to shut your video off because you keep breaking up. So I'm going to shut the video off, but we'll still hear.
Okay. Okay. Is that better?
Don't know yet.
Keep going. We'll see.
Okay. On that summary page, if you look down to the bottom, it'll show that You know, these are approximate numbers that'll show that this property had an approximate taxable value before it was cleaned up of around 48,000. I'm not sure where that was at in the cleanup process, but let's just assume that that's true. And at the back end of the cleanup, it now has an approximate taxable value of $1.5 million. Now, as you go through and you think about these things, you think about, well, we applied for a grant, maybe we're doing a brownfield, and maybe we're abating some taxes long term in order to achieve that value. But I think the lesson learned there, and this is just one specific example of how an active economic development program, whether it's the BRA, whether it's the land bank, pick your activity, how you can take a thing that is not providing great input to a community and improve it dramatically. It's significant. And if you go through the document, literally to section 1.4 of that document, and that's really the most important part, the good economic development is not just like a monetary return to the community. It's also the indirect and direct return to the community. So in this instance, you removed a contaminated site. You protected the Platte River. Approximately $3 million invested in the Village of Honor and the tax base, new jobs, improved the image of the city, or the village, excuse me, not only for tourists, but also for the people that live there, and actually put something of real value back on the tax rolls. So that is one just very narrow example of, economic development done right, where, the result is a net gain. Now, if you think about it, some may say, well, we put a lot of money into that. We've done a tax increment, plan for this. But what if you hadn't? And what I always ask myself is, all right, if you've got a situation like this and the development costs to clean up a property such as this far exceed anybody's ability to take it on, you're left with really two choices. You keep having what you got and nothing happens, or you either abate or TIF or do some type of incentive program to make that productive property in the long term. Now, that's just one example. As I said, it's very narrow. But if you multiply that over opportunities, whether it's the land bank, whether it's potentially doing tax abatements for selective, activity that might come to your community, you can see the multiple impact here. While it is longer term, there's a lot of positive that comes with these programs, not just the immediate, obvious, investment in the redevelopment project. Your neighbors to the south, Manistee County, have created a public-private partnership, and you were provided a link to their page. And I just wanted to, bring you to the slide on how the programs benefit the community. And really, I just leave that with you as a simple guide to how that particular program, whether it's an abatement or tax increment finance, works. It's a very oftentimes misunderstood activity in terms of what the taxpayers and sometimes county leadership thinks through. But again, it kind of goes back and highlights what you were able to do with the contaminated property in Honor. Now, those are applying programs. There's also, I think, as big a value, sometimes a greater value, but a most important value in being able to provide what Art referred to is kind of the service plan of, one person or one group waking up every day and thinking about economic development in Benzie County as their priority mission and goal. Oftentimes, there's no cost associated with good economic development, except the staff time and the administrative overhead that goes into it. And I wanted to maybe step back for a second and talk specifically to that with a recent example that I was involved in. And it's kind of telling a little story, but I think it goes to the heart of a lot of what we're talking about in this area. About a year ago or so, I was retained by a 100-year-old company in northern Oakland County, fourth generation family owned company. I got their start working for Henry Ford, doing castings for some of Ford's original factories. Over the course of many years, they had kind of developed into a very high-end and advanced aerospace and defense-related company, employing about 75 people, high-wage jobs at a facility in northern Oakland County. They had an opportunity to expand and create a new facility, 13 million plus new facility. It's the kind of facility that every community looks for. 50 net new jobs with the average wage above $85,000 a year. Low impact, non-emitting, non-intrusive. A facility that was designed to do sophisticated prototyping, 3D printing, and advanced tooling for companies that you've heard of, such as Lear, General Dynamics, and a lot of other very unique applications. The company had a piece of property that couldn't expand their existing plant, and they had another piece of property somewhere down the road, about 2 miles, that they thought would be a usable location for this expansion. Now, the interesting thing about this whole program is that the new facility was a technology facility. It did not necessarily need to be next to the main facility. But of course, the ownership thought it would be most effective if it was for shared services and being able to go back and forth and move equipment, so on and so forth. But it wasn't dependent on that. And so they retained me to say, literally asked me, is it, where should we put this? What makes the most sense? Do we try to do it here? Do we try to do it somewhere else? Do we go somewhere else completely? And interestingly enough, the owner of the company, the CEO, was a Notre Dame grad and had a very deep relationship both with Notre Dame for technology issues, but also interesting supplier relationships in the South Bend area. So I went into research mode. I learned everything I could learn about South Bend, Indiana. I got a hold of South Bend, Indiana. They have a public-private partnership in South Bend. It's a one-stop contact. I gave them 2 weeks to get ready. I told them everything I wanted to know that I didn't know already, and I would be coming down to South Bend. Through one person, they organized the city, the state, the county, the chamber, the technical college, and I left after a day of conversations with a 3-ring binder full of everything I needed to know about how this could work doing business in South Bend, Indiana, from local support, available land, sewer and water, utilities, everything. It was very well put together. And I will say the expectation of those of us that do this kind of work, this was not outside what you would expect to go to a community like that. Looking at all this information, there was a tremendous locational advantage to going to South Bend. Both for the cost of business, work comp, other issues, so on and so forth. Came back, met with the company, and I said, well, we really need to see how Oakland County responds to the potential that this location could go somewhere else. Oakland County, a little bit different situation than Benzie, I grant you. Bigger population, obviously, very large county budget, but they operate a county EDC with a one-stop system. Called one person, That person put together the townships, they put together the state, they put together the county, they put together the local Michigan Works folks, they put together the Sewer and Water Authority and put everybody in one room and one table. We literally had 2 meetings. We came up to the conclusion that we had sewer and water problems at this new site in Oakland County that we had to resolve. We had a job training issue that we had to work through because hiring 50 people of that level and that technical skill would require some assistance. We also had a zoning change that needed to be made for this piece of property for the expansion plus some variances. And we needed some assistance from MEDC to overcome some of the basic just cost of doing business differentials with the state of Indiana. Those meetings, this one singular person showed up at every meeting and did all the follow-up. Walked the township through a tax abatement, walked the township through the zoning, all approved, worked with me and the MEDC to get an incentive package put together for the company, which was accepted, and we did it in record time. I only put that out in front of you because, again, whether you're looking to attract small business, large business, whatever you're looking to do, one stop, a person with the lead and the ability to coordinate all the relative units together to solve these issues for the client is, again, the exception and not the norm. So is the norm, not the exception in the business of good economic development. So what did Northern Oakland County get? They got a brand new state-of-the-art facility, $85,000 a year jobs for 50 folks, and kept a company that had been in the community for 100 years, growing and expanding as a good corporate citizen and a contributor to all sorts of community activities in the Oxford area. So again, whether that's trying to do something like advance your opportunities with a developer to redevelop a contaminated site, work with developers for new housing through your land bank, whatever your targeted issue is, I will tell you that having that kind of structure in place is what people are looking for. And I will also tell you that not having that structure in place is kind of an open invitation for things to go elsewhere. It was very interesting in Oakland County. Genesee County got wind of it. Macomb County got wind of it. As soon as they got wind that this company was looking to expand, they were all over me looking at how they could get introduced to the company and show them their opportunities. And I think the last lesson learned here over the course of a long period of time, both in trying to organize the state's apparatus to compete with other states or other countries, it's the same at a local level. Regionally, cooperation is good, but I'll tell you, if you look to the south of you, Manistee County, not that they're trying to steal your jobs or compete with you directly, but they've set themselves up in this kind of manner. Now, as you mature, if you go down the route of wanting to get very active with this kind of economic development, you'll find your wins. And I think you'll find your wins by just being able to show the client, whether it's somebody that exists in your community already or somebody looking to be there, that you're serious about this. Now, I do get pushback and say, well, maybe we don't want to be about, this kind of economic development, but that's for you to decide whether you're trying to be a center of excellence for thought jobs, back office, technical work, engineering companies, things that bring high value to community, or if you're looking to address, an advanced light industrial, the lesson is the same. Whether it's, manufacturing, whether it's service, financial services, healthcare, being able to provide these kind of expansion, locational, and just hand-holding services is critical to your success. So that's my little story. I'd be happy to answer any questions or expand on any of that I can.
Steve, what I heard you, this is Art, what I heard you say repeatedly is that and these are my words, not yours, but routinely, it's the private-public partnerships that seem to be the most effective.
They are, and it puts everybody at the table. You have to have your utility companies at the table. You have to have your service providers at the table. You know, it's not just about government, and you have to have government at the table, because if you have to make a zoning change, or if somebody's saying, look, you know, we really need a tax abatement to make this work, the government has to be at the table. So it has to be a wholly coordinated function. There's no part of this that can be just, you know, and the worst thing is if they come to you and you can't provide a way to put all those people at the table and coordinate it. And then somebody like me is left wandering around the community trying to figure all this out. And there's just not that kind of time. And there's not really that kind of patience. You know, as people look to make capital investments in different parts of the state.
As we've talked about at the EDC level, you know, you need to be developer friendly, you need to be community ready for economic growth. You don't think about it only after the opportunity's there, you got to think about it in advance. And to be learning, what we've learned is to be an efficient EDC, operationally, it could run you anywhere between 175 and 200 a year. By going to the model that we're proposing today, we would be a member contributing X amount of dollars rather than trying to do the whole thing ourselves. It also would take the management off of administration. They would, again, just be kind of the same role that they play with authorities, other authorities, kind of be that contact person, but not the day-to-day. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and I think you're going to need your EDC, because your EDC has to manage your brownfield. That's a statutory issue. You have your land bank. That's a county statutory issue. This person would actually kind of reverse staff that. But what I would envision as this matures is this person or persons or this staff would be engaged in the EDC because there's opportunity, you know, proactively, bringing to the EDC opportunities to use the brownfield, to use whatever tools you have in place, because those are important tools. Instead of waiting for something to show up, that's just kind of my analogy, you'd be proactively working with the county level government to make all these things come together. And I think, you know, importantly too, as you look at sewer and water infrastructure, the coordinating functions of trying to plan for that can't just be done in a vacuum, correct? I mean, that requires townships being involved, cities being involved, you know, some planning being involved. So you need people to, you know, keep that fresh and keep it moving. It's you know, one thing to have a meeting about it. It's another thing to have a meeting about it where something happens after the meeting, correct? And then there's further pushing and further meetings, and people come up with solutions. So if that's your job every day when you wake up to make these things happen, or at least attempt to make these things happen, that's very, very important.
For this group to know that we've already been working on what those organizational documents would look like, but we've kind of stalled a little bit because we don't know where we're going as it relates to the county and their involvement, because that will dictate some of what those organizational documents look like. In addition to that, if we were to move forward, then the county EDC needs to reevaluate what does their organization look like. They don't need to meet as frequently, that's for sure. They'll probably play a bigger role on through the brownfield effort than they do today because there'd be more activity. But Steve, what I'd like to do now is just let's open it up to questions and see if what's on everybody's mind.
Steve, I've attended, this is Rhonda and I've attended either attended the meetings via Zoom or in person, since this conversation started. Has your original proposal for your consultation services changed since you've become more aware of where Benzie County's at in our EDC efforts? Or are you sticking to your original proposal for what you had contracted to provide?
Well, I proposed, and I believe it was accepted by Dan some time ago, a rescope of that to create a county kind of strategic plan for economic development when there was no entity to deliver it seemed like a waste of everybody's time and money. And so through Art and Dan, we kind of pivoted, bad word, but pivoted to helping this group facilitate this conversation, because as I looked at it organizationally, I felt that there was just no delivery system on the back end. And it was creating expectations that would probably not be fulfilled. I think what was on everybody's mind, the stakeholder group in the meeting that we had, really did point to the conversation we're having now. And so I just told Dan, I said, I will continue to help you facilitate to the point where you have a product. And I think, the product that's being proposed and was proposed originally was, I think you need to look at a private-public partnership, and that's where we're at right now.
Will your efforts as a consultant give the Board of Commissioners milestones that we should be looking for after, say, year 1, year 2, and year 3? I mean, we're fully aware that something like this needs to take traction, needs to get established, and it will develop over time. But we certainly do want measurable criteria to know if we're headed in the right direction. Is that something you're going to provide for us to look for?
I have already put it together in draft documents, but my role, and maybe Art can speak to it somewhat now, is to facilitate this conversation, not to be the font of all wisdom here. We have in front of us, and we're actually having another meeting tomorrow. There is a document, strategic outline document with dates and metrics in it. There is foundational pillars, much which came from the stakeholder discussions. And there would be, I think appropriately, if the county were to make any kind of, strategic long-term investment in this, there is a memorandum of understanding that would be entered into with the chamber, which would set up those milestones and checkpoints. So yes, it's all been contemplated, but that's really for that group to come to consensus on, not for me to, put forward without their, the group's final blessing, which I don't know. Art, do you want to speak to that somewhat?
Sure. First, I appreciate the question. This tomorrow we have a meeting of this work group for the EDC, 3 from the EDC board, 3 from the chamber. On Friday, we have an county EDC board meeting, and on that agenda is about, depending on what looks like is going to happen here, would be starting to develop the deliverables. What do we want to see the year 1, 2, 3, 4, so that we know we're making progress or not. But to Steve's point, and he and I have had lots of conversation on this, he can't set up the deliverables. We have to know what we're looking for. And he'll just guide us through whether that makes sense or not, or You know, do the timelines make sense? Can't have a deliverable that you're not gonna hit right out of the gate.
I don't want to ask any more questions till I give the opportunity for everybody else to jump in.
Good.
This is kind of way above my pay grade. I just wonder, are you looking at restructuring the EDC group? And with the other professionals that are coming involved in this, is that a focus? Basically, I'm asking you, do you have the right people on that board? Follow through with what you're attempting? The idea is great to me. You don't have the right people, can you actually make it happen?
It's always about the talent, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
talk about that at committee levels all the time here. We can't tell you that. We know that the chamber has an executive committee and a full board. The EDC has a board, I think made up of 7 or 9.
7.
Are they all the right people? Probably not. There's probably other people that we're going to see as we build this that are better suited in various stages of where our growth is at. Steve, you think, is that fair?
I think that's fair, but I will also, just add another element to it. You're all volunteers. You give your time, you give your expertise. But a lot of you have a lot of other big jobs too that you have to deal with. The most important part of this new venture will be the person that's chosen to lead it. That's going to be your critical element, because that person will be the one that acts on the agenda, the timelines, the strategy, the fundraising, all those activities. Every successful public-private partnership I've worked with in the state has a strong leader that coordinates, that builds, that works with you all to get consensus on issues. And I think that will be the most important person, if you will, immediately, that you're going to have to immediately seek out. And then I think the rest falls into place. I think people will self-select after that. But again, the idea here is to form a working board, which consists of both EDC and chamber, and take it forward. I mean, at some point in time, I jump off from this and say, we've worked to develop the plan. Here's the plan. It's got to run on its own, and that's going to take a strong leader.
Could I add something very, very quickly to that? In terms of steps, let's say we're moving this thing forward. The goal that we've discussed at the subcommittee level or the smaller working group is that we would develop a job description by August, post, and hopefully hire by the end of the year. We haven't spoken to Steve directly about this, but we have implied that when we get into the interviewing process, we would like his assistance in that to make sure that this is going to be new for everybody. And I can't stress this enough, and Steve certainly just did. The success of this is going to be who's at the helm.
I agree. I've heard you mention the word once, maybe twice in what you just presented, but infrastructure. Is that a pillar of what this group will be focused on?
Yes.
I think that's
Yes.
vital to our community, and I really hope that there's focus on that.
Yes, it is. Again, it's all in draft, and I want the group to present this to you, not me. I'm the facilitator.
What we'd be asking the EDC to do is this Friday is to make a formal recommendation to the full board for our second meeting of May. Because they've not really been documented in their minutes yet, because a lot of this we continue to just build. So that formal recommendation hasn't been made. Rhonda, to your point, and you've heard me say this before, whether we have we go down this road or not, folks. Someday the county's got to take a lead role in infrastructure. Because whether it be 20 years from now or 40 years from now, we're going to have septic tanks around some of our major lakes. We're going to have water sources beyond wells. And that's going to take a long time to build out. I think it's the county leadership's responsibility to start that. So we see that as a big piece. We can't lose sight of the fact that this professional also has some responsibilities to legislative activity for the chamber. They today, though, but hear me out. Today, the chamber is partnered with the Alliance. So they already have a paid professional that advocates for their chamber. So it's not like they've got to be down in Lansing advocating, but it's got to be part of their model, which, by the way, will bode well for the EDC.
So the AEC is gonna be play a role in this new.
Legislatively, yes. The Alliance for Economic Development?
Yeah.
No, you're not talking about down here, are you?
yeah.
at
Well, you
Manistee?
just said Alliance for Economic, I thought it was Alliance for
Well,
Economic.
it's the Northern
Success.
Alliance up in, this is like a 12 or 13 county alliance. Kent Wood, I think, runs it. I'm not quite sure. It is not what you remember from
Okay.
AES.
Yeah.
That was AES. No, that's a non-starter. This is the Northern Economic Alliance group.
Questions? Katie, where are you at with this?
I am supportive of me being more of a high level role, honestly. We've been spinning our wheels for 4 years on economic development. There's been a lot of ideas that have been passed around. I mean, you were part of them for the first couple of years. You know, the chamber, is it internal? You know, what is it? So far, this seems like the most viable option. There's been a lot of legwork done. There are a lot of right players at the table that I think are, you know, excited to see this through. So to me, a 5-year commitment on behalf of the county seems well worth the money and the time.
With measurables in place.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Commissioner Trigg, you attend these meetings. Do you have thoughts?
I do. So I think we are at a perfect kind of fork in the road, right? Where both the EDC and the chamber need something. And you know, we're at this, I don't know, bubbling pot. And I see this as a really opportune time. So yes, with that. And then of course, I see that, I love that, but then it's like, okay, but now we're being asked to fund some of that. And so my biggest part was, okay, that's awesome. But then to take some of this big money and put it into that, where is that going to come from? And you know, what else are we going to maybe sacrifice to do that? But I think you found a way.
I'm gonna let the administrator and treasurer speak to that.
Kelly, you want to come up? So there is funding that is identified as actually being set aside many years ago for economic development related to the revolving loan fund and such. And so there are funds that are sitting at one of the local banks that are interest as a result of that revolving loan fund and other economic development activities from years ago. And in Kelly and I's opinion, those should remain as an economic development fund, type monies and not be plopped into the general fund. Typically interest that's earned is eligible for the general fund. But in this situation, given that we're at this, you know, ripe opportunity, you know, we believe putting that money into the general fund wouldn't be the best idea for that fund, those monies, but rather committing them to what their original purpose was for makes more sense.
It's the interest from the loans that were given out years and years ago. If I'm
Correct.
mistaken.
Yes, this account was started back in 2004, 2005 for the revolving loan that we did for all the different businesses in the area. I think one of the last businesses was Garden Theater. A couple of other ones. Village of
Village of Ben-
Benzonia had one.
Crystal Mountains benefited from
Yep.
this.
Yeah,
Storm
been
Clouds
several
benefited
places.
from it. Graceland
Yeah.
Fruits benefited from it.
Yes. And back, so the last time we used this account was back in 2017, I think, when we paid off Venture North what was due to them for EDC purposes. And then whatever's, we've just been earning interest ever since. Got over about $200,000 in there, and that's all it's doing is just earning interest.
Tell them how much.
But the idea would be is, let's keep this for
It makes
economic
sense.
development reasons. These funds weren't being committed to any other service or purpose at this point. And so, if we can continue down this path of managing the budget with the funds we have over here, let's keep this for that realm. And if this opportunity is as great as it's so far sounding, let's invest into it. For years, Benzie County has wanted to invest in different things, including economic development, and there wasn't the means or the time or the energy. And I think we're to a point where we have all of those things. But it's a matter of, is the Board of Commissioners ready to take that risk, take that jump?
So our strategic plan specifically lays out that economic development is one of our priorities.
Absolutely.
Although we've had to sidestep it for the reasons you've said. To your specific question, would you be concerned that we would be taking money that could otherwise be used in the general fund for other purposes? This would not impact our upcoming budgeting time because it's not part of those monies being considered.
Correct. So yes, I mean, to me, yes, this isn't pulling something from something else to do this. This seems kismet.
So in the conversations about the model of the new entity, the Chamber of Commerce used to thrive on dues from private business. And then I also remember in some of the meetings that I've attended, the conversation about other partners, different entities in the community. Would you try to develop both of those types of revenue for the new model? Has there been discussion about that?
Yeah, we've talked extensively about the budget. We've already prepared a budget. And the budget, by the way, just in broad numbers, is about 175,000 a year we think we need, of which the county is going to be asked to do 40 for the next 5 years. If we are able to deliver on the measurables, there'll be additional support requested, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The chamber has money set aside from the sale of their building. They're going to match our 40,000 for the next 5 years. And then they're going to exhaust that savings account. It'll pretty well be done. I'll just remind you that they did, of the $25,000 for a paid consultant, they've already committed to 10,000 of that. Their membership has shrunk considerably. When I was chair, we were about 450 members. Today, they're about 250 members. But that still brings in about $45,000 a year, and they think they would continue that. And then we also have identified from some stakeholders that could make larger contributions that may or may not be sustainable, but we would go out to them and ask them to make that commitment. Years ago, I did that on a capital development fund, and in 10 companies, we raised $80,000. So we know there's people out there, and there are people that are in this discussion that are part of that group. And we're talking about, we're not talking about the ice cream shop. We're talking about the larger employers, like, I hate to put it out there, but you can use your own imagination. These are people that would be used to someone coming to them and asking them for not $50, but $5,000.
Good, thank you. All right, it's been a good conversation. Are there any other questions or anything you'd like to add, Steve?
No, thank you. Have a very nice day.
Thanks, Steve.
Very good. We will move on to our next topic then. We have asked Katie to provide us quarterly reviews of the budget and fund balance. And so we have a very large document. Katie probably suspects that we're all looking at the percentages, and anything that's super high, we're gonna ask her about. Anything you want to bring to the forefront to start the conversation?
No, I don't think so. I think today really the idea would be to just go over the budget a little bit, from where you guys see it as a standpoint from where we're at in the fiscal year. And then look at the fund balance policy. So we have talked about periodically about potentially adjusting that fund balance policy. As you know, our policy strives for a 25% fund balance. We are currently sitting at about 35% fund balance, as a result of our most recent audit. And so I want to have those conversations and kind of talk about, do we want the fund balance policy to stay the same? Do we want to amend it? Does amending it mean, lowering the percentage or expanding the use of those fund balance dollars, but then also going through the budget as to maybe where you're identifying any shortfalls or changes that you want to see, in the budget for going forward or what we've done so far. So it's kind of a big conversation related to budget and fund balance. So, I don't know, do you want me to simply go through it? Do you guys just want to ask questions regarding the trial balance that was provided to you? The trial balance that was provided to you, it shows the account numbers, the departments, it shows the amended budget for 24-25, which is what we're in right now. And then it shows the balance as of 5/31. It's really as of the date I printed it, but the system doesn't allow us to break it down further than by month. And then that last one is percentage of budget used. And so that is saying this percentage of the budget for this fiscal year has been used to that date. I know Art's going to ask the question overall, what does it look like? Overall, it looks really good for the general fund. We're at right now of the budget being used at about 51% of the budget. And so right now we're over halfway with our budgeting. So we're in really good shape.
We're about 77% through budget year.
Correct. So now there is a few things that haven't, the money hasn't been spent per se. And so there might be some changes that come down the hatchet later. But as you know, we took a hard look at the budget, specifically when we were budgeting, and we made a lot of changes with, bringing economic development activity into the general fund and really looking at our capital dollars and not, throwing additional dollars at the capital fund because we were still trying to finalize the rest of the ARPA dollars. And so things look really, really good from a general fund standpoint for the fiscal year. So I guess I'm opening it up to questions. If there was anything that was glaring, there really isn't anything too glaring to me. Anything that maybe is at 100% or close to 100%, there's an explanation for that. Some of the HS or HRA lines show 100% or more. Those are trickle down effects from when we switched from the HRA to the HSA. We threw a little bit of money in there to cover it, but at the end of the day, when we talked about when we had the HRA, we never really knew, right? We don't know how much of an HRA is going to be utilized. And there's some of those things that are still trickling in with Blue Care Network because they take forever to bill the counties. So some of those may be a little haywire, but we expected that because we didn't know what we didn't know.
So Katie, my observation is I don't look at every line item. I look at the aggregate per department and I look to see were we at 77% or greater? And actually, I'm more interested about 10% one way or the other. Nothing jumped out at me, but I tell you what continues to, I think needs the explanation, and maybe I'm the only one that needs it. But the way this is coming off the system.
Correct.
We don't manipulate this at all.
Nope.
And the way it comes off the system is you got to look very closely at what's revenue, what's expense. And I know it's, if you look, most of the time you can see that, but then I'll see categories. And let me just take EMS as an example. So you think you're looking at EMS revenue and an EMS expenditures, and then somewhere way down the report, you see another category with EMS in it again. I'm wondering what that's all about. And that's just, I'm not sure that's the right example, but.
Okay. So in the report, it shows asset and liability, and then it shows revenue and expenditure.
But assets is cash, right?
Yes. And the system won't allow me to manipulate this report to pull that out of the report. I think that's what adds your confusion is because it's showing assets and liability, which is cash and receivables. And then it's showing the budget, revenue and expenditures, which is what we budget to utilize to use against that cash. It'd be nice if I could manipulate the document to essentially take out the asset piece of it, so it's a little clearer, but I can't. And so that might be part of the confusion is you're looking at assets and then you're looking at the budget itself. The other thing to keep in mind is it's not very clear, you have to know the numbers to know if you're looking at revenue or looking at expenditures, right? The Michigan Chart of Accounts establishes what our numbers will be. The first set of numbers is your fund. The second set of numbers is your department. The last set of 5 numbers are your account. Any account that is lower than 702 are going to be revenue funds, revenue accounts. Anything 702 or above are expenditure accounts. 702 is our wage line, 723 is our overtime line, and so forth. So anything that's in that 600s, 400s, 500s, those are revenue dollars coming in. And then everything else is expenditures that's above that specifically. The 000 and then 001, 002, those are all cash accounts. Those are your assets and liabilities. Those are all those very, very low numbers that are in that specific in the set of lines. So yeah, it is a little confusing. I wish there was a better way to do the reporting. Kelly and I are going to be coming to you soon to update our system to go from the BSNA.net service to the actual cloud service. And in that cloud service, based on the webinars we've sat through, there's a lot more ability to manipulate reports and such. And so we're hopeful that when we're able to make that upgrade, we can really customize some of the reports a bit more.
So there was a time we made an effort to take all these numbers, put them on a spreadsheet, make it a little more easier. And I think I was in favor of too much work for you guys. Let's not do it. But in the world I came from, we did have accounting software that we could go in and design our own reports. So once the template's built, month after month after month.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about?
Yeah. So, yeah, there's added features with being able to customize all the things. We can already create certain reports in there, but the process is not as seamless as you would think it would be. But with the upgrades, everything, it appears to be much more user friendly to be able to do that. I could put it into a spreadsheet, but I would have to manipulate and manually delete the sections that you don't want.
We've already discussed that. I don't know if this group remembers that, but we tried it for about a year and found out you guys are putting several hours into it.
Yeah. So yeah, so the budget as a whole looks really good. You will know there's certain funds that, maybe are a little overfunded per se when it comes to the fund balance, specifically EMS that you brought up. That one always looks a little off the wire because one, we have to order ambulances 2 years in advance. So we have to really plan for that. We also had been saving to address Station 3, which we're in the midst of right now. So those fund balance dollars for EMS will most likely go down pretty drastically with the next budget, just because we're looking at doing that Station 3 as well as we just purchased an ambulance that we won't be billed for until the next fiscal year. So that one, when it looks like the fund balance is rather high, there's very good reason for that. That fund balance is restricted or committed to specific projects.
Well, I think the important thing is that when we have a fund balance that's building like that, what's the purpose of it?
Right.
And you just offered an explanation on one of them. That's the key. Otherwise, as a taxpayer, I'm going to say, well, why do you keep assessing me taxes if you've got, 2 years worth of revenue in there?
And that's that's exactly correct. So there's also some fund balances that are rather low. The jail fund specifically, their fund balance is not near 20 or 25%. And we know that, right? And we've been working on that for the last couple of years. I will applaud them that it has increased. It's over $140,000 as it stands. So that is huge, right? It has increased. I think in 21, when I came here, their fund balance was at like 33,000. And so it has improved. It's still not meeting the mark of what we strive to for a fund balance, but it has improved drastically. And that is just going to show the commitment of the sheriff's office up there to address that fund balance issue. So that one is improving. And so I'm not that concerned about it at this current standpoint. Another one that I am concerned about is central dispatch. And we've been talking about central dispatch every year since I've been here, that at some point, we need to figure out central dispatch and that we need to figure out alternative funding or additional funding for central dispatch. Central dispatch doesn't have the funds to support all the entities and to support, all the changes with telecommunications. We're in conversation right now with the townships, with the fire chiefs about buying new computers. We can't afford to do that again. And so there's some tussle right there, but based on the operations, it's a double-edged sword. We've been lucky in the sense we haven't been fully staffed, so the money's there. But if we were fully staffed, we'd be in the hole. That makes sense. Sorry. Whew.
That's been true since,
Since before me.
I think before Rebecca was even involved with it.
So, that's one this year we're really gonna need to look at closely and say, how are we going to support that? We worked so hard to stop supporting the jail fund with general fund dollars, but we may be at a point this year that we're gonna need to support central dispatch with general fund dollars to balance that budget. We've already done cost allocation, and so with the cost allocation, there are funds coming from other funds for support that is provided by central dispatch to those departments, specifically for, the sex offender registry, we were doing that, court services that are related to central dispatch. So we're already supporting it with that cost allocation idea. We've also evaluated the fair, rent per se for the departments that are in that building. So central dispatch is supporting the operations of that building, as a percentage to the other departments that are in that building. So we've really already, nickeled and dimed the other ways of offering support to central dispatch that we're really at a point where I'm almost positive we'll need general fund dollars to support central dispatch this year. We are capped at the $3 service charge on that. So there's really no, budget, there's no extra budget. It's kind of like the solid waste and recycling that is capped at a surcharge amount per parcels. And so there's not a lot of wiggle room in there. And as Commissioner Trigg can attest to, there's a lot of big things coming up on the horizon with materials management. Now, the state is offering grant dollars to do a lot of these things, but is it going to be enough? Probably not. So in 3 to 4 years, we're going to be right back to where we're talking about now, essential dispatch. How are we going to support recycling in Benzie County as well? And so that is coming down the line.
Let's talk about central dispatch for a moment. How much did this upgrade of their area cause operating expenses to grow?
Well, I would say, I don't have a percentage off the top of my hand as far as like how much. Now let me just hold on. Let me pull a report.
Because I'm assuming that some of that new revenue we need there may be as a result of the move.
So yes, some of it is, because now there's the sharing of utilities and operations, buildings and grounds up there specifically. So a portion of their dollars is supporting, the toilet paper and the Kleenex and, those sorts of things. So that is some of it. We also had a lot of growing pains in the sense of we had to buy new equipment and new desk and those sorts of things. So that added to the deficit as well. Their fund balance, was quite high before, but there was 300,000 of that committed to the project for itself. So that took away that quite a bit. So if you look at the budget for central dispatch for 2023-4, it was a budget of 921,000. We came in at 831,000. Almost all of that is contributed to the fact that we weren't fully staffed. In 24-25, we have a budget of 989,000. However, with the amended budget is 1.2 million because of the 300,000 going to the project itself. So far this year, we have spent 433,000, so roughly just under half of what is being budgeted. But as Shelley said a little bit ago, we have 3 vacancies up there right now. So far, Corey doesn't have all of his numbers yet, so I don't want to say what he's budgeting for this year. So it's steadily increasing, but I will say it's increasing at a lower percentage than say the general fund is. So based on those numbers, I'm not sure if the actual cost increased much based on the change in space, but rather of just the cost of doing business has increased. We had collective bargaining. So we had changes in our wages and our benefits and those sorts of things. As you know, we had new benefits and that caused an increase in our benefits. So based on those changes of just those last couple of years, it's not a huge huge increase because of their space change. It really is the cost of doing business.
So let me ask this. We have policy about fund balance.
Correct.
We can only spend it on certain things.
Correct.
Would it be worthwhile to create a separate policy for excess fund balance where we see these needs in service areas and insurance costs where that, you know, because if you said 25% and we're at 34, so that 9% would generate about about 800,000
Yeah.
ish.
Ish.
So is there the possibility to do that? Say we maintain this level here with the same policy, but a different policy applies to an excess because we have to take care of the campus and our employees and our departments first.
This policy talks to the excess.
Yeah.
The excess. So this is saying that we'll strive to keep a 25% fund balance, but then the unrestricted only may be spent on X, Y, and Z. So this policy is saying that. So I think what you're describing would be conflicting policies.
I think
we
would be
need
an
to amend.
expansion of
Yeah,
that policy
amend or
if we
expand.
don't fall within X, Y, and Z where our needs are.
Mhm.
Well, if you look at unrestricted fund balance, which is a very short read, it speaks a lot to that. Talks about anything over 25%, you know, with 2/3 of the voting members,
Yeah.
you can pay that down for, you know, liabilities, et cetera.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but I don't think what we're talking about where we have shortfalls falls within that. Does it?
It doesn't, because
It
this
doesn't?
is specific to capital items,
Right.
equipment,
That's
general
what I'm
fund
saying. Do we need to
contingency.
expand that excess portion of that policy? to
Add a
impact-
couple
So this is-
items.
To address
Or we
yeah,
can
a
short
special
off
fund.
Funds that are underfunded.
Exactly, or insurance costs that exceed where we think, something
General
like that,
operating,
to
general.
a policy modification
Mhm.
for the excess.
So the unrestricted fund balance, that's only for capital expenditures?
So no, the
Correct.
unrestricted fund balance is to pay down unfunded liabilities, to pay for deferred maintenance or capital improvements, to fund equipment, to establish or augment the general fund contingency, or to establish earmarked reserves.
How is, take number 4,
Mhm.
it's to augment the general fund contingency account. Is that contingency account used for shortfalls?
Yeah, so pre-me, there was never money actually budgeted into a contingency, so your policy was put together to say you could establish contingency with your general fund balance. But over the last couple of years, we've been able to budget in contingency with the available dollars versus having to pull from the fund balance to establish the contingency. We haven't needed that.
And Ron, I guess what I'm hearing you say is you'd like that language expanded to speak more directly to it.
I'm wondering if it's necessary to do that with the conversation we're having today.
Well, if there's any
Address, yeah.
confusion, then yes,
Yeah, to
because somebody should be able to walk in and know that we're within policy.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that we are with the conversation that we're having.
Then yeah, we'd want to clarify it.
Well, I'm not saying at this point we're going to necessarily need fund balance to support central dispatch. We may be able to utilize it within the allowable budgeted expenses of the fiscal year, and then we wouldn't need fund balance to do that. I'm not, so,
That wasn't what I was hearing. It sounded like we were gonna need fund balance.
no, we're gonna need general fund dollars to support.
Okay, dollars now. Okay.
Yes, and
Okay,
so,
there's a difference.
but at this point, you know, not everyone has their numbers in yet, so I don't know what's available as extra to support the central dispatch or what have you. If there is not the dollars available to support central dispatch or another fund, then I'm going to say to you, hey, how do we pay for this? And the most likely train of thought is going to be fund balance because we have unrestricted dollars. But in that instance, or even now, we need to amend the fund balance policy to allow for that expenditure.
Exactly, yeah. Agreed.
Or anything else you want to go over with the budget? Otherwise, I think what I'm hearing from this board, I've only really heard nods from the two of you, but the others, I'm hearing to bring back a fund balance policy that expands the unrestricted piece of it. The other piece, though, we haven't gotten to is the county wanting to maintain a 25% fund balance goal? Or do you want to change that? I know there's been periodic conversations about changing that 25% mark. So I mean, if we're gonna do a policy amendment, I want to do it all in one kit caboodle.
I personally think, I think history shows that 25% is too much. I don't know what the real number is, but I think if we looked at the last 3 to 5 year history and we saw how much did the fund balance by dollar increase over that period of time, it might tell us that we only need, I don't know, 22%. So
So
that means that everything above 22% would fall into the unrestricted.
I was just in here doing some budget forecasting. Let me get back.
And by the way, I have nothing to substantiate my thoughts. That still has to be developed.
And
Sure.
that's probably why I'm not in favor of it right now.
Right.
If there were a reason to move that needle, to me, it's an insurance policy for all these unknowns down the road, and it can be freed up by a 2/3 vote at any time, but without one in our face, I'm hesitant to do it.
I look at it as a rainy day fund
hmm
for an opportunity if things really go south, which for time has happened.
So I've been working on this forecasting tool, which all of you have been asking me for a while. And I think I have it figured out, the kinks mostly figured out. So in 2020, 21, we had a fund balance of 32%. In 21, 22, it was a 30% fund balance. In 22, 23 was 59%, but that was ARPA. 23, 24 went down to 37% because we spent ARPA. 24, 25, which is where we're at here today, about a 38% fund balance. Based on the numbers projected in there so far, it's still about a 38% fund balance.
There's something being added in there that wasn't before, because I can remember periods of time being told that we were under fund balance, which we had, decided as a group wasn't gonna happen. Do you remember that as well?
Are we
And-
projecting income
Yeah.
correctly?
I'm gonna tell you,
Still have-
I'm gonna tell you, we were not projecting revenue. We were so understating income and none of us really understood it.
So I want to clarify too, I'm not manipulating these numbers. The system pulls the actual from your system from those years. And so this is pulling the actual numbers of your system and giving me that percentage.
So there isn't a category that's being added in that might not have been viewed when Shelley was reporting. I don't remember numbers like that over the years.
This system, all I say is load data and I select my years and I select the amended budget to load the data because the amended budget is the final for the fiscal year as of the audit. So all I click is load data, select the years. This is what I'm getting.
Should have been told a higher amount.
I'll tell you what's more likely happened. It's not that there's new numbers being added. When it was being given to us, there was numbers that weren't included. That's more likely to have happened. And as an example, you've asked more than one time, Gary, what about our interest income?
Yeah.
I'm telling you that
Oh,
I
yeah,
looked
we
at
had
that.
hard-
There was times that interest income wasn't even being shown.
Shelley
And at
never wanted to show
5%,
it.
that was substantial.
And-
When Michigan class was paying over 5.3%.
And it's still paying over 4, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's my frustration is that if we keep the goal to be over 25% or more, and I'm putting a budget together and I have a department that has a real need, and I'm trying to stay within that policy, now I can't use any of that money unless I acknowledge I'm taking it from the general fund balance. I can't take that money and saying, that's what we're filling the department's needs with.
And I would agree with you if we weren't at 34%. Because to me, the conversation is to free up that 9% to do exactly what you're saying. There's no need to go below 25.
Well, and yeah, that's right. This year, we may not have a need at all to do that. But there are years that we were certainly left with the impression, because I remember you say, well, yeah, we're at 22%. Well, quite frankly, in retrospect, it sounds like we're more at
Doesn't sound like
30%.
Yeah.
We just weren't being given all of the revenue. And, I don't want to point fingers,
Let's go to
but
the bathroom.
we have a number of examples on DTRF, was an example, interest income was an example. One year now it wasn't a large amount of money, but we found an account that nobody even knew it was there. We were able to capture that money. It was for the not child care fund, but it's like through the child welfare department. What's that called? He has since left here. But in any case, we were able to take that money and match it with other money. So it more than doubled it. But by God, we didn't even know that money was there.
He wanted us to appropriate a tenfold what we really needed. And when we questioned it, things got a little hairy.
Well, he didn't even know that money was there.
I know.
But so I just think we're doing a better job of forecasting revenue now than we were. And that's why we're seeing it. And I understand you're saying, Art, why drop it below 25%? Because it seems like we're at 30. Well, I get that. But if I get into the budgeting process and I find out that I'm shortchanging a department because I'm trying to stay at 25, and really all I need to do is be at 22, I'd rather fund that need and be at 22 than be at 25 or greater.
And if we were at 30, there's, you know, legitimacy in that conversation, but that's not the number I'm hearing. I'm hearing 34. And if we can't, we have 9% wiggle room. And I feel like that's more than adequate to get through this budget year and not touch that 25, but I am open to whatever this board wants to do. I just don't
So-
see,
My take on it is, we leave it at 25%. And the department is short 1 year during the budgeting process, they can then ask us, to change that 25% down to 22%, right? But
I don't wanna forego the responsibility to live within your means. I mean, they each get a budget. I don't wanna make it that simple.
Well,
Say,
agreed, that's-
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, I want each department to be fiscally responsible with what they're doing, right?
But if times have changed, if the landscape has changed and like dispatch can't survive on the $3 earmark that they get, then we need to pivot with them and make sure they're whole and safe and operating on a level where the dispatchers are backed up. I mean, that's not an unreasonable goal for what they deal with.
And maybe I'm not making the case, but I just have seen years where things went unfunded. And then at the end of the year, our fund balance grew by $200,000. And I think about like what happens at the state of Michigan. What I would like to see is that our annual budget always matches our annual revenue. That's what I'm looking for, instead of saying, oh yeah, we have to take it out of surplus. That's my ultimate goal.
I guess I kind of agree with Rhonda. We're at a really good level right now. If it starts going down, then yeah, then maybe we could take and say, yeah, let's now move it down to 22. And so that for the next budget cycle or two from now, they'll have that extra wiggle room.
Well, okay, as long as I get what you're saying, guys, and this is not, as I've heard someone say, the hill I want to die on, but what I don't want to have happen is that we aren't doing capital improvements because we want to be at 25% or greater. When I think of what this board has been able to accomplish in the last several years, that quite frankly was all deferred from previous boards, I couldn't be more proud. I don't want to take a step backward. Gary, you pointed out one time when we did the parking lot, probably should have been done 10 years earlier. And by the way, cost us more because we waited that extra 10 years. That should be on the list of things to do. And if we have it, if we have the money as surplus, but it takes us down to 22, so be it.
So we can vote on that, correct?
Yeah.
If there's a big project comes up and we need the money,
We can adjust that policy and lower
because the
that.
policy I like.
Mhm.
Here's the one difference. Administration. They don't really know what they're working with then, if they know they got to get 2/3 vote.
Yeah, but if we modify the unrestricted, the overage from the fund balance, to free that up, that's some wiggle room. I mean, I know another thing on the radar, and I'm just gonna throw it out there because we're having a conversation. There's talk in building and grounds about an irrigation system at Beulah's water rates. And which is gonna be significant. It's gonna keep the grounds looking very nice. It's something that would be lovely to have and keep our campus really pretty, but it's gonna be a jump in utility costs and our water bills. Is that something we want to put in that 9% that we're using for other purposes? I mean, there's things we need to talk about that.
Right. We've also brought up at the buildings and grounds, the maintenance barn needs to be re-sided, reskinned, whatever they call it. it's been deferred for so long that it's snowing inside the building in the winter. We need a new truck. We potentially need a back blade, some sort of utility tractor would be very helpful for the maintenance staff to maintain the campus. So there's all these things that are needs that have been kicked down the road. Think about the rooftop units weren't planned for. We had to figure out where to come up with that money to pay for those, and they're 55,000 a pop. And so, yeah, there's those things.
When you adjust the policy and bring it back to us for that window of 9% from the 34 down to 25, are you gonna have those needs in mind to draft it so those funds with the proper vote can be used for that type of thing?
All the things I just listed are already allowable expenditures in the policy.
Okay.
The only one that's not is if we needed to cover a budget shortfall from another fund.
Do we have those on our capital plan already?
Yeah,
Those things
no.
you just said?
All of them but the barn. But they were planned out and the need has really moved up, so we're gonna have to move them up. But they had been on the plan for about a year now.
See, that's another significant difference here too, is over the last 5 years or so, we developed not only a capital plan, but a capital budget that they'd never had before. So these things were counted. I need to digress for a second, though. You scare me when you talk about the sprinkling system. Are we not allowed to put a well down?
I'm gonna ask tonight.
Okay.
Village meeting tonight. Yeah.
Man,
If we could, and I'm not sure.
Just run a
how-
pipe out to Crystal
Yeah,
Lake.
I'm
Pump
not
it.
sure. how it
That's my
works.
idea.
I hate to
I,
be watering
we
our
discussed-
swan.
We discussed that at Building and Grounds and I've been charged to find out tonight, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have a buildings and grounds committee meeting next week.
Yeah.
And so we can talk about some of those things a little further in depth.
You guys ever hear about, around over in the UK where they're turning, they call it meadowscape. So the lawns are turning things into meadow,
So like
Letting it
wildflowers.
grow.
natural to your region. Bring your horses and. Yep. Let 'em.
Yeah, your goats.
Well, here meadowscape would be brown grass and pine needles.
Wild violet.
Well, it depends on what kind of-
I'm just thinking wildflowers, but
No, in this yard, if it's not watered, it's pine needles and fried grass.
I was saying,
the timing of this conversation is just awkward because we have the money. And if we made that modification you're talking about, it gives us greater access to it. Because I'm putting myself in administration's role as, I'd really like to know what I can work with. Otherwise, it's just kind of a guess. And maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. But what I'm hearing is movement towards that anyway. And we're very open to the fact that if there's legitimate need, and it takes us to 22%, well, we're open to doing that. Because this day, the day of deferring maintenance, that's done. We have learned how much that cost us, not only financially, but quite frankly, from a reputation standpoint.
well, there's another thing, when all the auditors I talked to that audit other agencies besides this one, the fund balance percentage that they want to keep is never 25%. They're talking like 12%.
I think Gatsby's.
So Gap says 15%.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's math, when you're on a $21 billion budget, 12% probably is enough. When
It's
you,
all agencies about similar. I'm talking about Networks Northwest. I mean, that's their auditor. They can say, yeah, you guys are at a decent fund balance at, I think they're at like 14 or 15, right where you're supposed to be. I said, and I asked him that question. I said, so what is your recommendation? He said, I think it was up to 15%.
so on a $9 million general fund budget, that would put us what, 1.3 million?
No, it'd be more than that.
There's 9 million just the general operating.
That's just your general fund, yeah.
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 Katie, I'm curious, that number that you give us, does that include the contingency fund too? That surplus, does that include those numbers?
No,
Okay,
How much is in the contingency fund?
because that's new to us also, contingency
Bucks.
funding.
so contingency is within the general fund. There's about 97,000 in contingency still. We had budgeted 140 in contingency. And it's at 97 now. Some of those reasons for move, the radio maintenance, the large radio project, has moved some of those funds. There was also some additional funds needed for grounds maintenance with the change of the new, we did budgeting with the old grounds person. Now we have a new grounds person who's investing a lot more time and energy into our grounds. And so we had to move some money for additional items for grounds maintenance as well. So, yeah.
So I'll tell you what, as I listen to this conversation, what's gonna be interesting is when we want to put the operating millage back on the ballot, we're talking about having a 32% or something like that fund balance. How would we ever want to ask for an increase in an operating?
Exactly.
But I don't want it to go out 5 years either, but what I'm hearing said is next year won't be the year to be asking for an increase.
Probably not.
We need to, at the end of the year, when they tell us what's in the general fund balance, need to be a little closer. Cause the number she gave, like we were jumping 30-some% every year. And I know ARPA was part of that, but still, from the public standpoint, that doesn't look like we're hurting for money.
Right.
It's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah,
Well,
ARPA took it over 50%.
Yeah, I can attest to what happened before I was here and how those numbers were shook out. But yeah, I mean, 30, everything's been between 30 and 35, except for that ARPA year, which, threw things out of context, of course. So,
All right, is there any more conversation on the budget or the quarterly report? Anything else we need to cover? All right, I would open the last public comment. Then I would close that and ask for a motion to adjourn.
Oh, second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right,
So
good
moved.
conversation.